Welcome to our presentation today on Magic 5 Keys for Managers to Unlock the Power of Employee Engagement. My name is Charles Rogel, and I'll be moderating our presentation today. Our presenter is Dr. David Mason.
Hello, everyone.
David is a change consultant and master trainer at DecisionWise, and he holds a doctorate degree in cognitive psychology from Columbia University. He's been leading the development and delivery of our Engagement Magic training program, and in fact, this morning, Dave, you were just at Brigham Young University teaching this to a young, bright group of students. Is that right?
Yeah, millennials. And I realize how old I am now that my jokes just go right over. What are you talking about?
That was so 5 years ago. So DecisionWise now has been in business since 1996. We specialize in conducting employee engagement surveys and training leaders on employee engagement. And for the second year in a row, we've been named to the Inc. 5000 list of America's fastest growing private companies. This webinar is based on our Engagement Magic training program, which we conduct on-site and at client locations and through open enrollment workshops. This webcast is scheduled for 60 minutes. Everyone's on mute, so if you have questions, please use the question tool to submit them, and we will answer them as we go. In fact, we want this to be a very interactive presentation. This presentation has been approved for 1 hour of recertification credit through both HRCI and the SHRM organizations. After the presentation, I'll send an email that includes the program codes or activity codes to redeem your free credit, along with links to the slides and other downloads. And in fact, you can also download the slides and the other samples in the handout section on the toolbar right now. So if you'd like to follow along, just click on handouts and you'll see 3 PDF documents there to download. So let's begin. When we talk to managers about employee engagement, sometimes we get this glazed look in their eye, like they've heard this concept before, at least heard the words before, but when you ask them how many of you understand what employee engagement means, we get some mixed results. And so part of the good news is 65% of managers state that they do understand the concept of employee engagement, whereas only 41% of non-managers do. And that's kind of okay, but I think if you press them on what the definition of employee engagement is, you'd get about 50 different definitions.
See, that's the problem right there, right? This is 65% of just people that are willing to admit it when you ask them, without even being pressed.
Yeah.
And so that's actually lower than you'd expect. And especially when you go to the non-managers, maybe they're just more honest.
And I think most of the audience on our presentation today, which I think are HR professionals, would agree that there's some mixed ideas about what engagement is. People know it's important for the most part, but they kind of struggle to define it and really understand how to drive it in their organization.
Well, and are we going to the next slide? Because I think this is a big part of it, is we'll go to the next slide here and we'll see how we've divided engagement up into a spectrum. So there's 4 different aspects where you can be any one level of engagement. We've got them labeled here as fully engaged, key contributor, opportunity group, fully disengaged. But even that is usually an aha moment for people we're talking to. Most of the time they just say, well, you're either fully engaged or you're fully disengaged.
Mm-hmm.
It's either or, this dichotomy that
cold.
Exactly, and it's completely not the case.
So, sorry. So I'll share some research with you. We did the biggest study of its kind on the level of engagement of managers and organizations compared to the people that report to them. And so this data was really hard to come by because we really tried to narrow it down to understand, okay, what's the level of engagement of the people that an individual manager manages, and what is their level of engagement, and let's look at the comparison between the two. So we were able to gather out of our database of millions of responses data from 22 different companies that included 18,913 people, so almost 19,000 people. Mixed in there were 2,300 managers, and we only included managers that had 4 or more direct reports that responded to their annual employee engagement survey. So we're looking at their annual employee engagement survey data here and measuring the overall level of engagement between these 2 groups. And within the survey, we use a set of anchor questions to measure engagement, so we're able to accurately tell, okay, who's fully engaged compared to fully disengaged. So this is the spectrum that David was talking about. And what we did is we broke them up. So we looked at the 4 groups of engagement for managers and the 4 groups of engagement for their direct reports. And so on the bottom here, you'll see the fully engaged managers. There were 808 of them in this group. And within those groups, the people they manage, their direct reports, had a spectrum as well. So if you're a fully engaged manager, 36% of your people were fully engaged, 48% were key contributors, which were also engaged, 12% in the opportunity group, and then 3% were fully disengaged. So this is kind of the spectrum we observed of engagement with a fully engaged manager. As you go down the line, you can see with a key contributor manager, opportunity group manager, and then a fully disengaged manager, what the spectrum of engagement looks like for the direct reports in each of those groups. So it's not surprising that you'd see more engaged employees being managed by a more fully engaged manager. What we thought was interesting is as we looked at this, oh, sorry, I didn't have the differences here. You can see that there's a great drop-off between fully engaged managers down to key contributor managers, and even farther to those opportunity group and fully disengaged managers. So there's something going on here where the less engaged a manager is, the less engaged their team is, which isn't too surprising.
Right.
But what we're showing here is that the data actually bears this out. The good news is a fully disengaged manager doesn't necessarily kill the engagement of their entire team. There's still fully engaged members there and key contributors, but the differences are pretty stark. And so what we're trying to, I guess, say here is that focus on your managers. If you can engage your managers in your organization, you will most likely also have engaged employees that work with them, and there's a lot of benefit, a lot of influence that your managers have over engagement.
Now, one of the key features of this is it's not just having an engaged manager suddenly just proliferate through the organization and everyone just becomes fully engaged by osmosis.
Yeah.
What happens is that these engaged managers tend to do the right behaviors. They tend to engage in the right behaviors to elicit engagement from their people. Oftentimes they don't know what it is. They kind of just stumbled upon it through happenstance or whatever. But the idea being that the more engaged you are, the more likely you are to facilitate that in others, which is why you can see that even with a fully disengaged manager, it doesn't kill you because the people working under them find ways to still be engaged through those behaviors. Now, the key to this, though, is that we can be deliberate about engagement. We can actually, it's a skill, it's a learnable skill with specific behaviors that will allow you to create it in your organization. And so that's what the webinar today is how can we be more conscious of the things that create engagement? What can we actually do rather than just have a bunch of pop psychology, fluffy, feel-good kind of speaking? Let's talk about the actual behaviors that create engagement.
Now, one of those behaviors is high fives.
High fives. Your high five ratio needs to be at 67% or more.
Yeah. We'll get into that in more detail here. So as we conduct the training, what we're doing is kind of giving you some nuggets from the training that we actually conduct within organizations. One of the activities we do is this slide here where we ask, what does a good day look like for you?
And you'll notice this is not a rhetorical question. Write in, what does a good day at work look like for you? We won't use your name, so if it's like when my boss isn't there, then go ahead and write that. We won't out you. But go in the question window and say, hey, this is what a good day looks like for me. We'll read off a couple, and we'll use that as an example of going on, okay? So examples are so far when I accomplish something. Here's one, when I check off everything on my list. That's one we almost always get. There it is right there when my boss isn't there.
Right.
Okay.
When I feel like I contributed and feel valued.
Feel valued. When I serve people. Okay, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a big one that we get out of there.
When I receive recognition.
Okay, for sure, right? These are all things that we'll actually be able to tie into the different magic elements that are really good. I also noticed that there's a lot more of you on there that didn't respond. So you didn't think we were joking when we said this is an interactive presentation, I hope. We want to reiterate that's not the case.
Yeah, please feel free to jump in at any time. So let's talk about our definition of employee engagement here. We have it as a two-part definition. So it's an emotional state where employees feel passionate, energetic, and committed to their work. And in turn, employees, this turns into employees who give their hearts, spirits, minds, and hands to deliver a high level of performance to the organization.
What you're seeing here is you're seeing how there's two very specific categories. One is an affective or emotional state, the passion, the energy, the commitment, right? And the other is the behavior, where you're giving of your heart, which is kind of like your that is part of the emotion, right? Your spirits is your attitude, your mind is your thought and creativity, your hands are the actual like getting in the dirt and doing something. It's really giving every one part of yourself your whole self into something else that's not yourself. That's engagement, right? When you can overlap that Venn diagram with your work where it becomes part of you. And that's when it becomes good. When you're doing something for someone else, when it's obligation, that's not good. But when you're doing it for yourself, that's when you become engaged.
And when we look at engagement, what we say is it really drives the performance in your organization, right? So we always hear the kind of the cliche that people go above and beyond, the extra mile, they give extra discretionary effort, that sort of thing. But it's really when people are wanting to do their best when they're fully engaged.
Well, and think about it. Think back to your answers that you had on the what does a good day at work look like for you? And all your answers, except for that one, were when I help people, when I do more, when I accomplish something, right? This is why you see that return on your investment. It's because it's not people just putting in their 8 hours and then going home. It's people saying, when I help someone, I have a better day. So the more I feel like I'm helping people, the better days I have, and the better for your organization, right?
All the concepts we're talking about today are based on our book, Magic, the 5 Keys to Unlock the Power of Employee Engagement. And it's based on a lot of research that we've done over the years, not only by mining the data in our database from conducting thousands of employee engagement surveys, but also through psychological research and different case studies. And so it's a good read. I recommend it to you, especially as you're looking to leverage engagement in your organization. We did another study. Just about every organization that we asked has some kind of program in place to improve employee engagement, and this book can really help you put that program together. So when we look at the engagement experience, we want to separate it into 2 different ideas, and when we'll talk about kind of the difference between satisfaction and engagement.
This is the very key to everything, is once you grasp this, everything else kind of falls into place. When we talked earlier about managers and employees and frontline employees not necessarily knowing the difference or the distinctions of what engagement is, this is one of the things that comes out. People go, oh, it's when your employees are satisfied. And in fact, a lot of people do employee satisfaction surveys. And we're not saying that's bad. We're just saying that's not ever going to result in engagement. Here's why. Satisfaction ultimately comes down to satisfying the terms of a contract. It's a transactional environment. So if you look at what's in the employer-employee contract, what you hear is, I will give you work, you will give me money. And here's your 401k and the details on that, and I won't sexually harass you. And that's kind of it, right? That's the contract. And when you satisfy the terms of that contract, you are satisfied. Now, what you're not is super pumped up to go to work because you have a great vision program. You know what I mean? Like that's not how it works. When Sunday night rolls around and you're thinking about like, okay, I've got a whole work week. Are you excited because you've got some phenomenal projects to work on and the people you work with are so engaging and so on? Or are you like, oh man, another grind? Driving here today, there's a billboard along I-15 that says, life begins on Friday evening, right? The idea, of course, being that, and maybe I'm quoting it wrong, maybe it's life begins on the weekend or something like that, but the gist of it is essentially, hey, once you're done working, then you can truly live your life. Well, hey, you know what sucks? That work takes up a huge portion of your life, and if you don't feel like you're actually working at that, then that's a huge part of your life that is just miserable. Now, the point is, in satisfaction, it can be, think of it like a balance scale. So things can get out of whack where I start asking too much of you and not paying you enough. I start asking you to work on the weekend, or I start saying I'm giving you extra responsibilities, but I'm not paying you more or recognizing you more or something like that. And you get out of balance on the balance scale. At that point, I'm not satisfying the terms of your psychological contract. And if I'm not doing that, then you're unhappy, and you'll find ways to make it up. You'll take longer breaks. You'll not work as hard. You'll badmouth me to everyone else, right? More than usual, right, Charles?
Right.
Like so. And smart companies go, hey, let's throw that out of balance in a good way. If I start throwing perks at my employees, then I can expect more work for them, right? Because they're going to want to satisfy the terms of the contract, reciprocity. If I give you more, I expect more. So what do? Here's a gym membership. Here's tuition reimbursement. Here's a foosball table, all these things. The idea being that you will now work harder. Now think about this again. When's the last time that you woke up in the morning and you were so pumped because they had Pop-Tarts in the treat cupboard? And you're just like, oh man, I can't wait to get to work. It's going to be such a good day. I love my job so much because of Pop-Tarts. And not saying anything against Pop-Tarts. They're delicious, right? But it's never going to work. Perks are great. They help you feel like you're cared about, but it's not an engagement solution. It's a satisfaction solution. So you put satisfaction there at the bottom, the foundational. You want to get that out of the way. You want to take care of it. But engagement is the next step beyond that. That's when you're waking up in the morning super excited to go to work, when you're telling your friends about your work and how much you like it, right? That's engagement, and that's not ever going to be taken care of with satisfaction. So you really have to draw the distinction between the two. So engagement.
Yeah, and before I was going to mention, before we talk about magic, engagement drives performance, so it really, as you said, makes you want to work and do your best. Satisfaction drives retention and also attracting good talent. So if people recognize you as having great benefits, great compensation, great perks and opportunities, they're going to be attracted to work for your organization. They might not have a clue about the job and what it means in terms of their own growth and engagement
or
factors.
The culture and things like that.
But they know that, hey, this is a good company to work for because of the great benefits that they offer. So those are important, and you want to make sure you have those in place and that you're competitive in the market. But don't go overboard, and the more you invest there, the less return you'll see down the road.
Right, because it's never going to solve engagement, because people will just be like, okay, thanks, now what's next? Okay, thanks, now what's next? So attraction, yeah, but in terms of performance and retention, engagement's the way to go, because you can't pay people enough once they give up on the job. You say, here, I'm going to throw more money at you. Okay, that works for a little bit, but they're still gone.
Yeah.
If you want to solve the engagement problem, you have to solve the engagement problem, not the satisfaction problem.
Right. And so here are the 5 elements, 5 keys to employee engagement. It's meaning, autonomy, growth, impact, and connection. We'll go into detail on these, but we want to kind of give you an overview of kind of what they mean, and also offer a poll question as we talk about this in preliminary terms. So I'm going to launch a poll now and ask you which of these 5 keys are most important to you personally for your own engagement. So take a moment to reply to the poll, and we'll kind of explain these as you're taking it. Meaning is, finding meaning and purpose in your work. Autonomy is being able to kind of
shape your environment.
Yeah, shape your environment.
How you do stuff.
Yep. Growth is different than advancement. Growth is about being stretched and challenged in your work. Impact, of course, is getting things done, getting recognition. And, of course, connection is not only a social connection, but also feeling connected to your environment, your job itself, the organization you work for. So it looks like most people have voted. I'm going to go ahead and close the polls and show you the results, and we'll talk about which of these is most important. So let's see, close and share. So all of you should be seeing the results now, and it looks like it's split pretty evenly. Growth is a little bit lower than the other items, but that's interesting because
that's really even.
Yeah, we see typically a high level on impact and meaning. Those are usually the 2 that stand out the most initially when we talk about this.
Right, and then growth is usually third, and autonomy is usually dead last.
Yeah,
is what I see. And so that's interesting. The group we have today. And what's also interesting is when we actually do engagement surveys, growth is almost always the number 1 in terms of what people are at least communicating. Whether that's the actual driver of engagement for this organization, who knows? But it's always at least the one communicated the most.
All right, so let me hide this and go back to our presentation. So what we find is that the takeaway here, the key learning is that these items, these keys, do operate differently for different people, right? So it's not like everyone needs to have all of these high on every aspect to be fully engaged in their work.
No.
Some of these are more important to other people than others.
Depends on the place you're at in your life right now, honestly.
Yeah. And so sometimes I think a lot of people might take autonomy for granted if you're in kind of a professional position where you have a lot of autonomy. You're just expected to kind of be a self-motivator in essence.
Well, and where you think other people see it. Like I know in my job I can ask you if I can do something, or if I can do something different, or if I can take on a new opportunity, whereas a lot of people don't even know they can ask. And so for me, I just assume everybody does know, and so I think we have incredibly high autonomy, whereas the people under me are like, oh, wait, we can do that? I didn't even know. I didn't know that was an option. I didn't feel autonomous.
So let's start off by talking about meaning then. We define meaning as when one's work has purpose beyond the job itself. And the question we ask is, does your job inspire you? And this is an interesting question, especially I think as you do this within the training, because I don't think most people have really considered this.
No.
And, it's different if you're, a doctor or a nurse or maybe a police officer, or maybe you work for a nonprofit organization that does great humanitarian work around the world. Then, you're looking for that, and that's something that's very important to your employment. But for those of us with regular jobs, you know, I don't think we think too much about this on a weekly basis.
Yeah, when you're working in like telemarketing or serial manufacturing or something, right? You're just kind of like, okay, sure. You know, if there was an apocalypse, we're not going to be the first job to get like, oh man, where's the telemarketers? We need to set them up. And so a lot of people go, oh yeah, well my job just doesn't have meaning.
Yeah.
And so what do you do in a situation like that, right? And throw out some ideas if you've got them, and we'll speak to those as you go. Again, this is participatory. But what do you do when you don't have a job that's meaningful? When you have a meaningless job, how do you fix that? Because it's one of the most important things, honestly. Let's just get this out of the way. Meaning is the one key that drives all the rest of them. Because if
why do you get out of bed in the morning?
Yeah, because think about it. If you want autonomy, it's got to be meaningful autonomy, meaningful growth, meaningful impact. It's the adjective, it's the descriptor for all the rest of them. So meaning is one of the most important ones to at least get a handle on. And then if you do, fantastic. We do a lot of companies that have a lot of inherent meaning, and so they score off the charts on this, right?
Yeah, and a lot of times when we ask this question in training, you know, some of the jobs that come up are, well, you know, a customer or a fast food you know, worker. You know, what kind of meaning do they have at their job? You know, fulfilling orders all day and working with difficult customers.
Or what's the people that handle complaints? The save line. What's that?
The suicide line?
No. I feel like that's meaningful.
Yeah, that's very meaningful.
Don't get me wrong on that one. More just like when someone wants to cancel their cable. And
oh yeah, they're just the customer service reps.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially like a cable customer service rep or a television. Yeah.
And so if you're in a job like that, is meaning just right out for you? Is there nothing you can do about it?
Yeah, and that's the question that we pose. And so we have a case study here, or we're showing an image of a cafeteria worker here in a hospital. And Dave, I think were you at this presentation?
Yeah, this is me.
This happened? Okay.
Yeah, so we asked the question about meaning. Because like what happens when you have a meaningless job? And we had someone stand up and say, I have a job here at this healthcare organization that's honestly meaningless. No one cares about what I do. And the next person got up and gave a job that, for the most part, scores low when people say, is it a meaningful job? It was.
So you're at a hospital doing this training in a group of doctors and nurses who probably find an immense amount of meaning in terms of saving lives.
And I think it was an electrician stood up and said, like, hey, I just come and make sure wires are there or something. I'm preventative or something.
Yeah.
And then the next person that stood up was cafeteria worker. And she said, listen, she's like, I know that a lot of times food service gets a bum rap and stuff, but I'm going to be honest. I find this job so incredibly meaningful because when you come to the hospital, more often than not, this is not the best day of your life, right? If you're having a baby, sure, but for the rest of you, it's honestly some of the worst days of your life. And a lot of times you're stuck in the hospital and you haven't gotten any good news all day, and the one good thing that you can have in a day is a good hot meal. That might be your one bright spot that day because you've just gotten the worst news of your life, and that's something I can do. And so I make sure that every meal I make is well done, well cooked, well prepared, so that these people have, and she called it soul food, that these people have their soul filled up by the food. It's the least I can do in my realm to help these people find something in their job. And she got 400 people in this room, standing ovation. Right? People are like, oh my gosh, I'd never even thought of it that way. But she'd opened everyone's eyes to how they could take something and create meaning for it. Right?
So I'll never joke about hospital food again, huh?
No, because you're so insulting, Charles. Unbelievable.
So Laurel commented here. She said, meaning can come from how you handle interaction with others. The challenge is when you have a perceived meaningless job and do not interact with others.
Okay. And the key here, and I love that she brings this up, the key with meaning is value alignment. The idea being that we all have internal values, and some are just shared across everyone's existence, right? We enjoy helping other people. Most people have that as a value. Yeah. So a job that's very obviously helping people, police, doctor, teacher, parent, these are all jobs that, for the most part, everyone shares that same value. Now, what Laura points out is, I want a job where I can interact with people because that's meaningful. Well, it is for Laurel because she's a people person. She enjoys people, she enjoys helping people, so on and so forth. I know a number of people where a meaningful job would be not interacting with people.
The less I have to interact, the better.
Yeah, for whatever reason, because that's not their value. And in fact, it gives them that great anxiety to interact with other people. And so for them, give an example. Like I said, I was up teaching a class of like 60-something kids today. And for me, wonderful opportunity. I find it very meaningful. How many people can you think of, just here decision-wise, where if we said, hey, great opportunity, You're going to go give a keynote in front of 60 people.
They would die first.
Right?
Yeah.
Not meaningful to them. So
Yeah.
the key is value alignment, to find what people find valuable and then speak to that. And the other one is to help people reframe the things that they are doing, much like this cafeteria worker did, reframe the behavior into a meaningful way, tie it to that behavior. Let me give you a story, and let's see if you can tell me what behavior this is, okay? So let's go to the world's largest indoor coliseum, right? Like, I love this story. Our CEO was on a plane and saw a guy wearing a shirt saying, I'm part of a team building the world's largest indoor coliseum. So you're going to be like, oh man, I got to speak to this person. That's incredible. What do you do there? Are you the general contractor? Are you the architect? Are you the investor? Like, what do you do that you're so proud of your job that you're wearing this shirt half a world away?
Yeah.
And what did he say? You know the story, Charles. What did he say?
So he said his responsibility was to install the electrical plates over the electrical outlets throughout the whole stadium.
I installed plate switches, or plate switch plates.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? And okay. And, oh no, that's it, because there's like a million of them, so it takes all day.
Right.
That was it. Now, what value is he tapping into where he finds that meaningful? Because a lot of people would find that very rote, meaningless physical labor, and they'd be like, oh my gosh, like that just sounds like a recipe for carpal tunnel. But what is he getting out of that? What's his value alignment where he was able to take a behavior that was not on its surface great and turn it into a meaningful one? What is that? So I'm asking the question, it's not rhetorical. Anytime I ask a question, you can go ahead and jump in, and we will give you credit if you get the right answer. And while we're waiting for answers, I'll just go ahead and seed that. He's tapping into, I am connected to my country. This is going to be such a big deal. It's going to create lots of jobs. It's going to be a phenomenal aspect. I am part of the biggest indoor coliseum in the world, and that's going to be ours in the Philippines. We're so excited, so proud of it.
It's 55,000 people.
Okay? And so you're tapping into the patriotism and the nationalism and the part of being something grand that outlives you, right? Like this idea of being something beyond the work itself, greater than yourself.
So a couple comments here, making a difference. Another one, he's connected to the bigger picture of what he's contributing to.
Absolutely.
So alignment is really key.
Exactly. And so here's the thing. If I asked you on the audience here today, what are your top 5 values? I think most of you could probably come up with 5 values. But you know what you're not doing? Is you're just coming up with the easiest ones that come to your mind. There's so many values, and a lot of times when we actually do a value alignment activity, we say, okay, well, what about this one? And they go, oh, yeah, I hadn't thought about that one, but that is more important to me than, let's say, nationalism or something like that, right? Leadership or fun or creativity or whatever, right? And so value alignment, if you want meaning, that's how you do it. Now, inherent meaning is where you essentially have the meaning just baked right into the job you're doing.
Yeah.
It's one where it's very obvious that the work I do creates the meaning that I'm looking for, satisfies, fulfills that value, helping people, right? Associated meaning is where maybe the value itself isn't in putting on the light plate switches, isn't in making the food, but what it is what it means, how it's associated, what the job provides for. I can help people by making this food, right? I can help people by putting these light plate switches on. I can help my children go to college by working these hours or picking up that second shift or whatever, and that becomes very meaningful so that every slog of a day you can go back to that value and it gives you the power and the renewable resource to keep going.
So autonomy now, changing to the second key, is the ability to control and shape one's role and environment in a way that best uses one's talents and preferences to produce optimal results. Kind of a long definition or wordy definition to basically say kind of the freedom to do your best work. And so we ask the question, are you given the freedom to fully utilize your talents and abilities in your current position? This is where a lot of people would say, well, no, I only am supposed to do this, and this is what my job is, and I need to do that well, but I feel like I have a lot more to contribute.
And anytime I step out of my role, they say, hey, stay in your lane.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, quit rocking the boat.
Yeah, this is your job kind of a thing. And it's a real shame because autonomy is a phenomenal place. And here's my question, Charles. If you come to me, right, we're going to pretend I'm Charles' boss here, right? I'm finally living the dream. Charles, you come to me and say, I'd like to do something this way, and I say no. And then you come to me a second time and you say, hey, I'd like to do this, and I say no. Come to me a third time. What am I going to say?
No.
So at that point, do you come to me a fourth time?
I'm done.
Okay? This is what we call learned helplessness. At this point, you've learned, hey, it's stupid for me to go ask Dave. He's a bear of a boss. He's not going to allow me to flex my creativity muscles, and so you know what? That's on him. I'm just going to sit back and put my head down and do what I'm told. And guess what? All of us have that almost as a natural default. We don't want to. In fact, most of us want autonomy because we want to spread our wings. We want to be ourselves. We want to do this, right? But let me run a scenario. Any of you that went to school in America, started kindergarten at like 5 years old, and what are some of the first things they teach you? Not the actual content, not the letters and numbers and stuff like that. What do they teach you socially?
How to sit in a chair.
Right? What do you do at a bell?
You can get up and go.
But line up, though.
Oh, line
right?
up,
Like, ring a bell, line up. Ring a bell, sit down. Shut up. Don't move. Raise your hand. All this kind of stuff where you don't get to do anything until you get permission from someone else.
Yeah.
We train people from age 5 on to essentially be amazing factory workers, which was the original idea for public education, right? We're training factory workers. And we still follow that today in the sense that we treat people in this very top-down hierarchical power model where you just do what I say, and after you've paid your dues, then you can be in a position of leadership where then you can tell people what to do
Right.
and they listen, right?
Right.
People don't like that. And it creates learned helplessness. And it also creates an accountability problem because what happens is you tell me to do something, accountability is on me now.
Right. I did it. It got messed up. It's your response, your problem, not mine.
Exactly, because you told me to do it. Yeah. And so I don't care if it's a stupid idea. I'm going to do your stupid idea, and then it's going to be on you. And so everyone starts playing the blame game and the accountability game, and it all comes down to autonomy, which is ultimately a trust exercise. I trust that you will do what's best for the company. I trust that you will recognize where your abilities fall short, and you will ask me for help, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not to say that you deserve that trust, right? But the idea is we need to have that conversation. Going back to meaning, remember how I said values are going to be different for everyone?
Yeah.
Autonomy is going to be different for everyone too, right? Autonomy is not even the same thing for everyone. You mentioned earlier that connection, we can have different types of connection. Well, we can have different types of autonomy.
Yeah.
We've got up here on the screen, spatial autonomy. This is where I work, what my space is like. And so that means maybe decorating my cubicle, or maybe it means I work from home. We have temporal autonomy, which is when my deadlines are, or what time I have to come into the office, or when I have to take my 15-minute break, right? Or can I combine 2 15s and make it 30 minutes, that's just one, right? Social autonomy, who I work with, or to the other side, who I don't work with. And lastly, task autonomy, which is the one that we typically think of, this idea of more than one way to skin a cat. I want to do it this way, you're telling me to do it this way, this is stupid, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people on the front line know the better way to do it because that's what they've been doing their whole life. And then a manager comes and says, no, we're going to do it this way because X, Y, or Z.
Right.
And then you go, oh, all right, that's really how it's going to be? All right, fine, whatever, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do it slow, and I don't care. Mm-hmm. And so this is the problem with autonomy, is that chance to flex it, right? So the idea here is more autonomy, always better. It's always going to be better, right?
Well, there's a fear, and there's a problem sometimes. So
we should say a legitimate fear.
Yeah. So managers a lot of times will fear giving autonomy because you think you give an inch and people take a mile. You say, hey, it's decorate your cubicle day, and you walk into the office and you see Dave Mason's cubicle decorated with Zac Efron posters all over the place, and you realize that you've made a mistake in granting autonomy to your employees.
Right.
So what do you do? How do you kind of draw the line or set expectations the right way?
And that's such a good question. And I appreciate that you love Zac Efron as much as I do, apparently.
Right.
But this idea is that it is not anarchy. More autonomy is not better. And in fact, it's not good, not just for the reason that someone might take advantage of it or abuse the situation, but honestly, if you give someone too much autonomy, you give them too many choices, science research shows that people rebel against that. Mm-hmm. There's a number of decision-making studies that talk about the more choices you give people, the unhappier they are with their choices. The longer it takes for them to make their choices. And a lot of times people just make the wrong choice.
Yeah. And
so there's all these problems with giving people more autonomy, and yet people want it. So where do you find that balance? Where do you strike that balance? Well, we'll talk about it a little bit more in the growth section, but really there's a sweet spot of autonomy where it's not anarchy, it's giving people, now remember the definition, the power to shape one's environment so they can be their best self, okay? And their best self doesn't necessarily mean just give them all the freedom that they want, right?
So it's within a kind of a structure.
It's within a structure. We talk about music all the time, right? Mm-hmm. How much structure do you have? Like, well, you've got to follow the beat, you got to follow the tempo. You can't just play some other song if you're in a band,
yeah,
right? But in between that, hey, dress how you want, sing how you want. You know what I mean? Like, there's as many different types of singing or singers as there are types of music. Another example I always use is air traffic controlling. If I just took you to a tower and said, hey, I will pay you double your salary, you are now an air traffic controller, and I'm going to give you complete autonomy. You just land those planes however you think best.
Yeah.
How many people jump at that chance? No one. Almost no one. Crazy people do. They raise their hands.
Yeah. One thing I was going to say as we finish up on autonomy is that it really fosters this idea of innovation and learning and kind of stretching and being empowered and accountability, all those things that you talked about before.
Sure.
But it really depends on, creating this environment of trust where you trust the employee, they trust you, and you can kind of grow and kind of expand that together.
Which comes back to accountability.
Yeah.
Right? I'm taking accountability for myself instead of pushing it off on my manager, and the manager is trusting me and will hold me accountable and provide the resources for me to do my job and be accountable so they can trust me.
And this is a real tough one for micromanagers because they don't trust people to kind of get it done to their standards. And so they're always focused on making sure it's done the way they want it, which really hurts performance a lot of times.
This is their least favorite section, I'll be perfectly honest.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about growth. And growth is developing and becoming better tomorrow than you are today, both professionally and personally. And like I said before, growth isn't just about getting a promotion or advancement in your career. It's really about feeling, do you regularly feel challenged and stretched in your job?
And this is, again, a basic human sort of need, right, is everyone wants to grow. The reason we don't a lot of times is because we're scared of it, right? We're scared of the risk that we're taking by allowing ourselves to stretch. So we avoid it. We'd rather pass off that accountability to someone else so that we don't get in trouble. I don't want to lead a team because I could fail at leading a team. I don't want to offer a new idea because if it gets shot down, then I'm embarrassed. But really, everyone wants to grow. No one likes being static. And unfortunately, you can't even stay static because the longer you stay in one position, the better you get at that position, which makes it easier and more boredom-inducing, right? Think of it like this balloon here. Balloons aren't very fun when they're just kind of like flopping around. So you blow it up in air. But what happens if you leave the balloon full of air? It's going to start deflating. You kind of need to constantly stretch it. And if you stretch it too far, just like we talked about with autonomy, it's going to be too much. You're not going to want it, right? So you want to find that sweet spot where it's a fun balloon. It's not too limp and boring. It's full. But you got to keep stretching it. You got to keep on and on. And this is the sweet spot. If you want the actual scientific definition, it's called the zone of proximal development. And the idea here is that skills alignment is where a lot of us find ourselves. And what you want to do for growth is not just throw someone into the deep end, but you want to give them the very next step. I'll give you an example from this morning when I was teaching that class.
Yeah.
Is I brought up someone who didn't know how to juggle. Handed them 3 balls and said, I'd like you to juggle for the class. And the very first thing they did is they tried to juggle all 3 balls. Now, why on earth would you think that you can go from 0 to perfect right away? Now, not to fault this kid because that's how everyone does it. That's why I do the activity.
Right.
But what you need to do is just be able to do, can you do 1 ball first? Oh, okay, you can do 1 ball. That's your skills alignment. Now, what's your very next step? Well, it'd be 2 balls. That's your zone of proximal development. And as an expert, I can tell him that. The zone of proximal development is that stage where you need help, where you need an instruction booklet or an instructional video or a mentor who can just say, here's what you need to do next.
Yeah.
That's your zone of proximal development, and that is the growth sweet spot. So this guy gets up, he can do 1 ball just fine. I say do 2 balls. He did that just fine. And we're like, okay, now we're going to move you to 3, and we're going to teach you that technique. And he developed juggling faster than he would have if he'd just done it by himself, because I was able to point out the very next step. Can you do that in business? Absolutely. And when you do that, people stop caring about promotion, and they start going, I want to grow. I want increased responsibility. And autonomy leads to that.
Yeah, and most managers don't think about this, I think, because they want people to be very proficient in their jobs and to kind of achieve results. And so they're not too concerned. Like, once someone's really good at what they're doing, that's exactly where they want them. Like, keep producing for me, great, everything's running fine. And they're not trying to challenge them more or, give them additional responsibilities. Number one, it's kind of, sometimes it's too hard to figure out what you can give, what assignment you can give. And other times, managers are looking to really run an efficient organization without any problems or bumps in the road.
Right, and once you've got someone that's doing it perfectly, And that's the thing, is it's honestly, at its heart, a very selfish way to look at it. You are a tool, and you're working perfectly. And so instead of sharpening that saw, I just say, we're just going to keep riding that horse until it's done. And honestly, there's a little bit of fear. If that person grows too much, they're going to want something else. They're going to want to go elsewhere.
You might lose them.
Yeah, they get promoted, go to another organization and stuff like that. And you almost have to get over that if you want to worry about engagement, because engagement is not what you give to people. It's how you help them engage. And if they want growth, you're going to have to help them with that growth, even if sometimes that means they get too good for the position they're in.
So as we talk about impact, impact is causing and being part of results, seeing positive and worthwhile outcomes of one's efforts. And I think this is pretty self-explanatory for most people. We all crave making an impact in the organization. And the question here is, do you leave work each day feeling like you're able to accomplish something significant? And I think for a lot of us that's sometimes hard, or sometimes we don't even think about it. We're just like glad to get home sometimes and not think about work.
Well, and part of the reason is because we're not good at impact. And so we've given up on that as a goal. And that's so sad, because that's everything we want out of life, is to make a difference. Because otherwise, what was the point of having us here? There was none. We need to be able to make an impact just to validate our own existence, honestly. Now, that's pretty heavy, much heavier than we expected for this webinar, right? But everyone wants that. It's a basic human psychological need to feel like you are validated. And that's what impact is. When you can point to something tangible and say, that happened because of me. I was a causal factor in that. I matter. And that's impact. Now, we've given up on it because it's really hard. But you know who's really good at it? Candy Crush.
Right.
Video games psychologically are amazing because they have figured out how to hijack our brains for impact. And so what they do is there's a number of techniques. I mean, we talk about gamification all the time in business, right? And this is what they're doing that really nails it, is when you go to a video game, what's the first thing a good video game, an addictive video game, does is they give you a simple goal.
Yeah.
One that you were like, okay, that's within my ability. And sometimes it's just like push the A button to jump. And you do that, and they give you a little ding, ding, and a little trophy. Hey, successful jump, right?
You earned 5 points.
Yeah, and you're,
or $10.
Oh, great. And they're like, now jump with this timing, right? Wait for something to come by and then jump.
Yeah.
You go, oh, okay, let me see. I learned how to jump. Let's see if I can do that. Okay, good job. Ding, 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 another trophy, right? But then it gets progressively harder and harder, right? Because they understand growth, and the impacts become harder and harder. But they've trained you to be like, I know that impact will result from my efforts. And I know that I will be rewarded and recognized when I do something successful. And I know that video games always have 3 or 4 different goals at the same time. So if I'm working towards one and I'm getting stymied, I'm at least working towards a secondary goal, and I am making progress for that, right? And so they've always got 3 or 4 goals. So no matter what you do, you are making progress. You are making a difference. And it's very obvious when you do. And that's what we can learn from video games. When people are working, how good is your recognition program? Is it essentially institutionalized high fives? Is it giving people sort of like script money and being like, hey, here's a little token of our appreciation, right? That's not bad, but it's not quite enough. You want people to feel like everything they do is building towards a larger goal, but that they're making impact along the way. So that it's not 2 years later, you finally finish something, there's your recognition, now I've got to wait 2 years for it again. Right? It's every day they should be able to go home and say, I accomplished something today. And if they can't do that, then we're doing it wrong.
Yeah, I think there's 2 keys here. One is creating alignment to the overall goal or purpose of the organization. So seeing how this little task or this menial responsibility I have really helps the organization move forward. And number 2, doing it in such a way where the recognition isn't just vague or casual. It's
more insincere.
Right. It's specific, and it's aligned with something they accomplished. So saying to someone, hey, great job today, thanks for coming to work, doesn't have the same meaning or impact as, hey, great job on that project that you did today and delivered to the CEO or something like that.
Right, and even more specific than that, I really liked how you did this. I don't know if they noticed, but I noticed that you polished that slide up and it looks a little different, and that's really good. They'll never notice that, but I noticed that, right? Yeah. Because, great job, that's water off a duck's back, right? That's white noise. That's like, okay, yeah, sure. That's the official thing you're supposed to say, And that doesn't mean anything to me. It's not meaningful impact. It's not meaningful recognition. Now, what's interesting about impact, though, is that it requires your effort. Because if you make an impact and it had nothing to do with you, if it was low effort, then you honestly don't care.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got this little quadrant up here, and here's one of the things that I want you to do is write this quadrant, or write this 2-box down so that you can do this after the webinar. But the idea is write down a list, maybe 10 tasks that you do every week, right? Things that are your responsibilities. And then what I want you to do is rate each one of them, high or low. How much of an impact does this task have on personal fulfillment, success of the company, something like that, right? High or low. And then rate it on how much effort it takes for you, high or low effort. And what you'll see is if you have any tasks that are low impact, low effort, well, shoot, why are you doing those, all right? Like maybe sometimes you have to have some, but if you've got too many in that, that's going to be so boring of a life, right? That's apathy at that point. I just don't care about anything. If you have a lot of tasks that are in the high effort, low impact, that's a rat race. That's exactly what we're trying to avoid. And again, you'll probably have some in there, but the idea is not to have a preponderance in that quadrant. If you have high impact but low effort, you'd think that'd be the best value, but it's not. It turns into autopilot. Suddenly you don't care about the things you're doing. Like oh yeah, sure, we use autopilot because I love the idea of pilots being up there and falling asleep so that they actually miss Minnesota when they're trying to land, right? They're piloting this magic tube through the air at hundreds of miles an hour, and it's boring. They're like, oh yeah, totally, right? And so I laugh about that. And then what the last quadrant is, that top right, is the high impact, high effort. And this is where you want stuff to land. That's where you feel like you made a difference and it was because of you. So very important to try and do that. Yeah. You're going to have them spread out all over, but you don't want anything that's too concentrated unless it's in that top right box.
Yeah, make sure you're definitely recognizing your employees when they accomplish something in that box as well.
And when you're delegating tasks, don't give too many of tasks that you think are like, oh, here's a great task, you'll love this, and it's just an obligation to them. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter, they don't care about it, it's not meaningful impact. So you'll notice a couple times now we said meaningful this and talk to your employees. If there was just a blanket solution, we would have given it to you, and honestly, someone else would have beaten us to it. You know, we're not that smart that we came up with this and we're like, oh, here's the magic solution, right? But what we do have are the greatest principles that if you follow them individually, that will create the most difference.
So we come to the last key, which is connection. And before, we talked about some of the relationships a little bit between the different keys. So you've got meaning and impact, which are highly related, right? So
sure.
When you're making an impact, you feel like there's a lot of meaning, and vice versa. Autonomy and growth really play together because the more autonomy you have, the more innovation you can create, which creates a sense of growth. And so those feed off of each other. And then connection is the last one, the sense of belonging to something greater than oneself. And this is really, like you say, the glue that kind of holds them all together.
Absolutely, the founding mortar, right? Connection is the stuff that interweaves throughout everything that you do. And when we say, do you feel like you belong, a lot of times what we think immediately is we talk about it in this social way. And that's great. Do you feel like you belong? Does that mean that you're just doing the type of job that works for you? Like if you got an accounting degree, you're being an accountant? Well, sure, that's a great fit, but that's not belonging. Belonging is where you start feeling like, yeah, these are my people, I really like it here, I'm really going to miss them. One of the questions we ask is, when you retire, what are you going to miss about this place? And always it's people, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But even that's not the best. We talk about do you belong, and then we say, let's go one step further. How integrated are you? That's the ultimate in connection, when it becomes an identity, when your thoughts are the company's thoughts and vice versa. And you can do that in 5 different ways. This is what's so fascinating about connection. It's social connection, we get that, right? Relationships, we're all aware of that. And you can, how much are the people your kindred spirits and how much are they just people that you can like go grab a beer or go to a football game with, right?
In fact, on our employee surveys, the highest scoring group of questions are around the team questions. So when we ask questions about teamwork and the people you work with, those are always the highest scoring questions on surveys.
Absolutely, which is a good and a bad thing, interestingly enough. It's a good thing in that you want people to feel like they belong and people, but it's a bad thing in the sense that if something bad happens to one person, then it happens to the whole team.
Right.
And so it actually spreads worse. And so you have to be really careful to manage that, and they can really band together and become almost like a silo, or they can band together and become an alliance, and stuff like that. And so you really have to manage people getting along so well that you have to give them a good environment, or they will band together because they're all in a foxhole together.
Right. Yeah.
So it's an interesting part of that social connection. But there's other types of connection that are very important. Let's talk about organizational connection. Just this idea that you are connected to the actual organization. So not just the type, right? Like, let's say I like business consulting. How connected am I to DecisionWise? Like, do I care if I'm at DecisionWise, or would I just go to any consulting company? Well, I happen to like DecisionWise. I have an organizational connection to it. I have a friend that went to go work at Nike, and I use this example all the time because everyone's like, oh my gosh, that's so great, you're going to go work at Nike. And after a while, someone's like, hey, do you actually want to go work at Nike? Like, is that important to you? Everyone has such a strong organizational connection that they just assumed that was the greatest thing that could happen to them.
He's like, oh, I'm an Adidas guy, actually.
Yeah, right. and so there's an organizational connection. Mission connection.
And I was going to add to that, that this is where you have your football team, right, that you grew up with and you identify with, and you would never leave that, never think about being a fan for any other football team except your own.
You're talking about the Browns. Let's just put it on the
right.
open.
Cleveland Browns.
No one would ever be a fan of the Browns. It's like,
right.
But yeah, even then, they have fans, and they live and die, even though like it's an essentially abusive relationship. They should have given it up a long time ago. But there's that organizational connection. It's very strong, and it's almost irrational because of that. Now, what's interesting is you can also tie into other ways. Like when the Browns win, it's like, oh, hey, we won. That's amazing. And then when they lose, oh, those bums, they lost, face dogs. Like, and you really distance yourself from that, right? And oh no, we actually have someone.
Her husband, out of Ohio for decades, is still a Browns fan. That's me. I grew up in Cleveland, been in Utah now for the past 30 years, and still had feelings for the Browns.
God,
I still feel whenever they lose.
Is that right, Charles? I didn't know that. I just drew that out of the air. I can't believe I used that as an example. To you with the husband, the Browns fan, my sincerest apologies. But let's talk about the other types of connection here. Mission connection. What is the point of what you are doing? And this goes back to, it doesn't matter what organization you're doing at, you just want to be part of what it's accomplishing. Me as a consultant, trying to make workplaces better. Working at a sporting goods store, we want to make the world a more interesting place and exploring it, right? Things like that. Mission connections, fantastic. You want to be integrated with that. Values. What are the values of the place? Do they value work-life balance, creativity, fun? What's the company? CEO, is it Patagonia? Wrote a book talking about like how they close down when the surf's up. Is that them?
Oh, I'm thinking either Patagonia or REI. Another one here locally, Skull Candy. In fact, they closed down. They're located in Park City up in the mountains. And they closed down, not closed down, but employees are free to leave on snow days to ski the powder up on the mountains.
Right? Like, that's a value I can get behind. And work-life balance, creativity, leadership, all these types of things that people are into, right? There's that company that, for better or worse, decided to pay everyone $70,000 as like a minimum salary, right? Yeah. And that's a value, right? We want to make sure that everyone has a really nice living wage. And so whether it works or not, at the very least, that's a value you can get behind. And lastly, task connection. The actual job that you do, how connected to it are you? Do you like putting in numbers into spreadsheets? Or do you do that because it's part of something else, right? Or do you actually really enjoy the work of what you're doing? As a consultant, this is easy for me to say, right? Like, this is why I do what I do, because I love the very nature of consulting. But other people might have a little bit of trouble. The cafeteria worker, for example, how much do you like actually doing the food, and how much do you like helping people? And food is just the way to do that. If you had another way to help people that wasn't food service, would you be just as happy going there? And if not, then no, you have a really strong task connection. But if you just want to help people, and it doesn't matter whether it's serving food or working in a nonprofit or being a firefighter or whatever, then it's not the task, it's the value that you're more connected to.
Yeah, and I think even people like with jobs in the trades, I have a neighbor and friend who does heating and cooling systems for large companies, and he can go on and talk about his work and what he does and how he regulates things and all the technical aspects of his job, and I can tell that he is definitely aligned with the task and connected to the task. I mean, that's who he is. He's a HVAC guy, and so you think about electricians, or you think about dentists, or you think about anybody that has a profession where that is really part of their identity.
I was talking to someone today, and they were talking about a mechanic, and he was like, yeah, like I go in, he doesn't know my name, he doesn't know my son's name, he doesn't know anything, but he calls us by our cars. He's like, oh, you're the '07 Tacoma.
Yeah.
Like, and like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. That's someone who loves their job.
Right. So those are the different types of connection. And I was going to say, and like you said before, this is really the glue that kind of holds all of the different pieces together and helps all of it work. So to talk about, or to kind of conclude a little bit, and we'll open up for some questions here as well as evidence. When we are conducting this training, the training is a day and a half. So the first day is really geared to employees and not managers. And we go through the 5 concepts and help people understand where they can find magic in their job to be more engaged.
If I can clarify, it's not that it's for employees and not managers. It's because everyone needs to understand it from a self perspective first.
Yeah.
And so it's not for managers in the sense that it's not to help you manage better, but it's to help you understand engagement personally, because you can't manage engagement unless you understand it really well yourself first. So it's self, very important.
And then the second day, it's a half day, is for managers only, where they learn how to engage their teams, how to kind of help people become more engaged, talk to their employees about the magic concepts, and really make sure that they're structuring the work environment so that people can become engaged. If you'd like more information about the training, just let me know. I can get you some pricing and other materials. One of the things, we took that brief poll, but if you'd like to take our free engagement self-assessment, you can go to engagementmagic.com/self-assessment. And there you can take a 35-question survey to measure your own level of engagement. Now, people like this tool because you can do this with your team, you can do it with your whole organization if you want, but it gives you a self-diagnostic that shows you how engaged you are compared to other people that have taken it. You get a percentile score, as well as breakouts for each of the different components, so you can see if meaning is truly the item that engages you the most, or if you're not finding a lot of autonomy in your job. Whatever the case is, it gives you a good idea of these different structures and how they play out in your own job. And then lastly, I'll provide to you, or I'll promote the book a little bit more too. If you'd like to get a copy of it, it's available at all the different bookstores. And then you'll see in the bottom left corner here the codes for today's webinar. So if you're looking for your HRCI or SHRM recertification credit, here are the activity codes that you can enter in online in your account, and those will populate there. So I want to thank everyone for attending today. Again, I'll send out an email with the link with these codes and to the materials that we had. If you want more information or pricing on the Magic training, I can also provide you that as well. And hopefully we'll have you join us on a future webinar. Thanks, everybody.